And we are live. Welcome, everybody. This is our inaugural session of an Artful Life, curious conversations about the ways humans make and use art. And with me today are Melissa Hefferlin. She is my co host and will be with us for this entire journey. And today's guest is Matthew Cutter from Cutter and Cutter Fine Arts, and he's also a fine artist himself. You're actually sitting in front of your own pictures, Matt, right?
I am. Yeah, this is a painting I have in progress right now from a trip last summer up to Maine. So you can talk about that if you want later. But yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation, and
Of course.
looking forward to the conversation.
Me too.
And we have tons of questions for you. But before we get there, what I would love to do is have Melissa and you, Matt, just introduce yourselves really quickly for the audience so we have a bit of context for those who are watching through the whole thing. Melissa, why don't you go first?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be happy to go first. I am a professional artist for 30 years. I trained in the USA and in Russia when it was the Soviet Union. And I come from an artist family. My husband and my adult son are also painters, and I'm so happy to be here today.
Awesome. All right, Matt, give us a little bit, and also a little bit of the background of gallery, etc. So yeah.
Yeah, so I started my pathway into the art world with my family. We've been in business as an art gallery for just over 25 years.
Wow.
For about 20 of that, I've been a painter. I sort of took a non-traditional path into the art world in both the gallery and the art end. I'm largely self-taught, although I've taken a lot of great workshops over the years and been influenced by a lot of different artists. But yeah, I love both aspects of what I get to do as representing phenomenal artists, as Melissa and her whole family and many others, and also my own journey as an artist has taken me to a lot of different places. I did come from a slightly artistic background. I had a grandmother and a great-grandmother who were both very good painters.
Wow.
So, yeah, I would call them, they were more like pastime painters, but I think the seed was planted long ago. My pathway into this was a traditional business administration type degree, focused on economics, but it's led me to this point, and it's been fun. So
awesome, very good. And the whole gallery part of and being an artist, I think that's a really interesting dynamic. Yeah. So Melissa, why don't you take it away with starting with our, as we joked earlier, our 250,000 questions we have for you.
Well, yes, you were talking that you had a business degree, and we're actually going to focus a little bit more on the business end at the beginning, since that is sort of the tradition of LinkedIn.
Sure.
And Nina and I are both curious, what has surprised you about the way people buy art over the years, either one thing or many things?
That's a great question. There's definitely many motivations for the reason people buy art. As a gallery, one of the things my family and I have adopted sort of as a mantra is buy it because you love it. And I think that is the best reason to buy it. Is there's some type of a connection. There's certainly there can be a monetary implication to it. People are making a sacrifice of hard-earned time and money to go and exchange it for this piece of artwork. And so there is that business aspect. But there's the commodity aspect, and I don't think we deal in that per se, or we certainly try not to say buy it because it's going to go up in value. I think that's not a great reason to buy it, although I'm not trying to judge people's motivations. But ultimately, I think it's always gratifying when you see someone truly connect with a piece of work, something that can make them laugh or bring them to tears, and then you see them exchange their hard-earned money for that, and they're taking that and bringing it into their home and into their lives, and that's the most rewarding, I would say.
Yep.
Does it sometimes surprise you what someone will connect with?
Yeah, it does. I mean, everyone's different, and so within the gallery, I think we have a pretty large array of different styles of work. Some people they connect to things for, like you said, for different reasons. Sometimes it's just the inherent beauty someone sees in it. We do represent some old prints from some deceased masters. Sometimes people connect to the name and being part of that lineage of history. Like this print was pulled 100 years ago, and now it's in my collection. And the thought of how many different hands it's passed through its journey. So there's different motivations like that for sure. Yeah, I don't know if there's any one in particular that I would say stands out, but we do see a lot of different reasons.
Is there any way that you've experienced that being in the art business is different than other classical businesses that you were taught in art school or that you see your friends in? Is there a difference?
That's a really good question. I do think art is a different type of retail than almost any other retail. Actually, growing up, I worked at a Christmas store in a little town in Barrington, New Hampshire. That's where I was raised, and I worked for a wonderful family, and they ran this Christmas store, and so I got experience in retail from about the age of 13, and I got to see like the process of what they brought in, how they would stock the shelves, and all the various things. The one thing I would say that distinguishes art different from any other retail, like you don't need art. Let's say you could make a case that like it's not something that someone has to buy to survive. It's not an item. It's not like food. It's not like gas. It's not like heating the house.
Yeah.
But then I would simultaneously make the argument you do need these things. Like we all need beauty in our lives. We need meaning in our lives. And I would say like art brings those things to the table. And so people's willingness to make that jump and collect a piece, that's going to bring them an intrinsic value that maybe they don't even see the day they purchase it, but it's going to live with them. And I mentioned it in the opening, but there's paintings that I've been looking at since I've been a little kid of my grandmother's and my great grandmother's, and I still have one in my kitchen today. And like that influence, it's on me. I mean, it's a seascape, and it's no wonder. Like a lot of what I like to paint are seascapes. I grew up close to the coastline, but then also the artwork. It's all those little things, like they make their way into your subconscious. I do believe that. So
I do too. I believe that art is a container to store meaning, exactly the way a Tupperware stores a sandwich. And it is such a great opportunity to encapsulate your values and what's important to you in your atmosphere.
I totally agree with that. I like that analogy too.
Because of working with your gallery, I know that your team works just as joyfully and as earnestly with a couple buying their first $100 print to I've also seen you sell paintings in the multiple hundreds of thousands for a single piece. What is different about working in those two price ranges, and is there a difference?
Great question. I would say there is no difference. And most of the time, the difference is in the head of, let's say, the sales consultant working the sale, because one of them might be 200, one of them might be 200,000, like you inferred. So there's an inherent pressure, I think, that it feels different on the consultant who's working with the client. Like this is a big piece, there's more to be brought, but ultimately the process of how we talk to people and the process of how we treat them and interact, try to learn something about them, that's all the same. So it's the same process. I think you have to develop a relationship with somebody. I don't care what the price is. No one's going to spend 200,000, much less 200,000, if they don't feel connected to you, if they don't feel like you're trustworthy. That's a big thing. Like we pride ourselves on being trustworthy, and in business, you're never going to be perfect, but you try to lay down a track record of doing things the right way, consistently, time after time.
How? Because you have, and I don't think it's an accident. I don't think you fell into it. What have you learned builds trust?
I think just people like the truth. I think the truth builds trust as much as anything. And again, going back to the motivations of why we buy artwork, we've never told people like, buy this because it's going to go up in value. Mm-hmm. This is an up and coming artist, and I know in 5 years you could double your money. Those aren't, again, people do things different ways, and I don't want to disparage anyone's methods or techniques, but for me, that doesn't feel authentic. First of all, I can't make that claim in earnest. Like, how do I know that? I don't know that. I don't know the track of an artist's career, and but furthermore, it's like there's a lot of power in telling someone that. They feel right away, like, okay, this is this is someone who isn't motivated just to make a sale. Yeah, and you've probably seen it, Melissa, but certain times somebody will say, like, to one of our consultants, does it look better? Is it this piece or this piece? And it might be too big, and it would behoove us to say, like, no, get the bigger one. It's perfect size. And we'll say, you know what? I don't think that's the appropriate size for that space. Go with this one. And I think when you do that enough over time, people realize, oh, I'm not just a mark. They're not trying to just make the sale, because I don't want to just sell you one painting one time. I want to sell multiple paintings over the years. We want to fill your house with beautiful things. And the only way you're going to do that, come back to, me and my family, is if you trust us. So yeah, being truthful with them, I think that's the number one thing.
So do you get like really young people who right out of college that will come to you and buy art, and how would you advise them to go about it?
Yeah, we have had some over the years. I have to be honest, we haven't had a ton. We had a gentleman, I can't remember his name. I would say it if I did anyway, but he was very young, maybe even high school, when he first came into the gallery. And my dad worked with him, and he allowed him to put a piece on layaway. He might have been like 12 years old or something. And he paid it off over the course of like years. And it was kind of amazing. And it's one of those experiences, I think, it probably shaped something in his life. It sort of shaped something in the culture of our business. I would love to see more college age students coming out and collecting art right away.
I bought my first piece when I was 16.
Did you really?
I did. It took a month to pay for it. And I recently sold it on eBay, but I loved it. 30 years.
What was it a painting of?
It was a painting by a Navajo artist named Earl Biss, and it was of Aspen in Colorado. It was extremely impressionist. He trained in France, and I bought one of 500 lithographs of it. I couldn't afford original art, but I loved it, and I think it influenced me as I turned to becoming a professional myself. And but now we just have so much original that I sold the print.
Right.
I loved it. And I loved that gallery worked with me, a 16-year-old who didn't have a car and would walk in with my little payments every month.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very similar story to this young man who paid it off. I don't even remember how many years it took, but the point was he wanted to do something at an early age that influenced him. So yeah, I think, culturally, I don't know where the influence is right now, but it's tough for someone getting out of college, first of all, to find a job, secure a place to live, looking for the finances, like where they need to be. So it might not be in the budget, but even culturally, maybe just more encouragement for that type of thing, that beauty can.
But before life, yeah, but I mean, before I go out and buy a poster and have that framed, or just a framed poster, I'm probably close to $200, which is what I will get, if you have the whole range at a gallery. And then, a poster is just a poster, unless it's like signed or like, a long forgotten movie or so. But, it still is. I think art doesn't have to be expensive, right?
Oh, no.
I agree. Yeah. In fact, we have some etchings done by an artist in our gallery, and she's fantastic. And most of them are on the lower end. I don't think they go above $200, and we have lots of people that come in and they buy 3 or 4 of them, and then all of a sudden they end up 6 months or a year later buying something else, and it's like it starts the ball rolling. It starts that process.
Yeah.
There's something magical that happens when you put something in your home. You're making a definitive statement, like, this is a little bit of what I'm about. And when people come over, you're sharing that with them. They're getting to see, like, oh, this is a little bit of my personality revealed to you. And that's fantastic.
You have touched on one of my buttons, which is I have such a bone to pick with business people who put really bad stuff up on their walls. It's better to put nothing, but it's such an opportunity to A, provide pleasure for your clients, and to B, talk to them through your choices about who you are and what you're about.
Yeah. I think, we've worked with
expensive.
Yeah. We've worked with a couple businesses, doctors' offices over the year. We've tried restaurants putting things in on the walls and different things for people in our 25 or so years. I think most of them, they are thinking about just, I have a blank wall and I need to put something up. And the mentality is, here's the color I like, and here's the size it needs to be. And that's where they're going with it. And certainly in the gallery end of what we do, we try to encourage people, like, there's actual value in maybe selecting something nicer. And we've also been successful in selling high-end businesses lots of great artwork for the office, and it does share something with your clientele. It makes them feel good when they're in a waiting room and they're looking at something beautiful before they're anxiously awaiting maybe a doctor appointment or whatever it might be. So
look at the way a church uses art to enhance the holy. And advertising. If imagery didn't work, there would be no advertising.
Yeah.
Right. That's exactly right.
And speaking of imagery working, one of the things I've observed about your brother and partner, Mark, your business partner, is that you rehang Cutter and Cutter all the time. And it's a lot of work. That's a big job. Yep. Why do you do that so often?
Yeah, and thank you. And just to say a few quick words on my brother, Mark. Mark is an amazing mind for this business.
Wow.
He does a lot of things in the business. He's very creative. We've worked together for a long period of time, and the fact that we can do that together, it just like there's like a non-spoken communication when we're hanging things. We kind of have our ritual. I'm on the hammer, and he usually gets the spot, and we just move through the gallery. And so that's been a nice synergy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, to your question, the reason we rehang so frequently is we want to keep it fresh, and you want to keep it fresh for multiple reasons. Obviously, clients coming in, clients coming back. It can't look stale. It can't look the same, but also for the staff. And sometimes the staff, as much as anything, will move a painting out of one corner of the gallery where it was seemingly buried, and all of a sudden you bring it to the front wall, and everyone congregates around. It's like, oh, I never noticed, X, Y, Z, whatever it is about that. And so you start to rediscover things. So internally, it's a benefit. Certainly externally, it is.
That I did not predict.
Well, it's all about context, right?
Yeah.
And we have a question from Dan. Hi, Dan. Thanks for participating.
Hey, Dan.
So Dan, actually a fellow amazing podcaster and LinkedIn liver. His question is, when I was working in the ad agency space, I had on my walls vintage ads found in old magazines. They're highly collectible and great conversation pieces. And, I'm sitting here sort of on my hands. I'm like, when I came to America, the first time I heard the term conversation piece, I was like, what the F? I mean, don't you buy art for the sake of it being beautiful, it moving you? The idea that art could be a conversation piece was like completely novel to me. I understand the concept now better, where I'm not taking it at face value, because again, to me, it was a new term. So I was lacking context. But so do people, and maybe that is a question then, why or how do you see people buying art more because it moves them, or because it is that conversation piece where they try to make themselves more important, they kind of elevating themselves in their lives by putting certain art on the walls?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I do think it's a little bit of both. And so ultimately, I think if someone's primary motivation would be to purchase it as a conversation piece, I would think it's been our experience anyway, that they still are inherently attracted to the work on some level. To make the acquisition, you sort of have to be connected on some level. I suppose there's people that would want to buy something that might just shock people, and it would be purely conversational. I don't discount that possibility, but I would say I think there's a good hybrid, and for most of our collectors, I think they connect first, and then it becomes a conversation piece, and then it might be like passing it down to their heirs, their children, and whatnot. So, but yeah, those are probably three of the biggest motivations, certainly.
Yeah,
it's funny on that Dan's question. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
To Dan's point about the posters, we actually represented several works from the 19th century, referred to as the Maîtres de l'affiche, and in French that meant masters of the posters. Jules Cheret was one of the the gentleman who he put that together, and he had other artists. And they would create a subscription based model where you would pay money and once a month you would receive a new print from various artists. And I think you got 12 a year, but there was always one of his was in the mix. Or they would send him out 4 at a time, and there would be a charade, and there'd be a couple other artists in there. But yeah, that poster becoming something of value as an art piece, and certainly all through Paris, they used to put them up outdoors with the thought that they weren't going to necessarily survive. And of course, so many of them have. And so we've had an opportunity to bring some of those into the gallery over the years and sort of connect that old advertising base to the fine art aspect. So.
And you had a bunch of Mucha theater posters too that were beautiful.
Yes. Yeah. I love Mucha is, I think, one of the greatest designers of space, and making everything, all the lines are lyrical. They're all beautiful. The way even he would break the line, you'll see a poster and it's got hard edges, and then a hand will break out the side, or a piece of a chair will just break the straightness of that line and come back in. And I mean, the quintessential, Art Nouveau style that he put a stamp on, I think is amazing. So yeah, we've had some good opportunities finding some.
I wanted to jump back to the investment part of art, which of course is different if you're investing in Van Goghs or Rembrandts or something. I'm talking about for more the everyday person. We had for quite a long time a gifted financial advisor as a tenant in our American rental property. And she was saying to my son, who's now 40, when he was in school, barter with all your friends while you're a student and save things, because with a normal portfolio, it's diversification. Be sure you like them, because you never know if something will be valuable, but something will be valuable. And my husband and I, when we were art students at the end of communism in the 90s in Russia, we bartered with all of our friends, and a portrait of me ended up paying for our new home.
Oh, wow. That's great.
For painting.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Yeah, there certainly is going back to what I said earlier, we try to not sell on the investment angle, but there's value in investment in anything that's bought and sold. And it's no different. The artists that we represent, I personally feel like they're good quality artists that are going to be here going forward. I just wouldn't want to make a promise to someone, based on past successes over the last 5 years. I could tell you you're going to double your money, something like that. But you're right, there's value in it. And I think when you collect really good quality artists and you follow them through their journey and you get to see the evolution of their work, there's going to be value in that sometime down the road. But I would go back to, making your primary motivation always goes back to what's here, what do you love? It's got to touch you, because when you don't connect that way, and I've seen it, we've made sales that way, to people, and they want to come back and they want to sell it back. And it's, it's just a part of the business. But it does usually happen if the motivation was more a commodity-based exchange versus a true passion for something. So
yeah. To that point, actually, we have another comment by somebody whose name I'm going to absolutely botch. Simgen Hayden, who said, what does Cutter Gallery see as main motivation for purchases, or the most common motivation? Different galleries will appeal to different collectors' tastes, of course. Cutter may not be in the shock value art. My husband tends to think that collectors are at the level you sell, that collectors tend to think a lot about investment. I tend to disagree. So I think the question really is, are you focused more on investment? I think you just answered that question.
Yeah. I think we have some, I would say we have certain things that are investment grade, but again, primary motivation, I think always is better when it's coming from that deep connection, that connective tissue. Gosh, I couldn't imagine living without that painting in my house. That's the ultimate. It reminds you of growing up, or maybe it's a figure that reminds you of a loved one or something. There's something deep there that you're never going to tire of a work like that. And if it's gosh, this is the newest up and coming guy to the gallery, and if I buy it now, maybe in 5 years I could do it. It's maybe, but maybe not. So,
But that's a problem with art, if you want to call it a problem. I bought a quite notable artist who was also a friend of mine, Note Vidal. He's from the Swiss Alps, as I am, and he speaks so deeply to me because his art is just so visceral, all about the mountains and the beauty of it and the strength of it and the madness of it and all of it. And I bought this piece, which back for me was like, when I wrote the check, I was like basically shaking in my boots. But I also knew it was an investment because he was up and coming already, quite established at the time. And then I'm like, okay, so, I'm spending these $5,000 and it's going to be also an investment. And I mean, it's 30 years later. It's going to be the last thing I sell before I
right.
start eating paper. So, I'm just so emotionally attached to that piece. Right. So yes, it's an investment, and it's not,
Right. Exactly. That's such a great story, Nina. And I've heard other collectors say that to us. But with that buying motivation, they bought things and they've come back to us over the years. And like, I'm so glad we did that. And I wouldn't even sell it even if I could. That's sort of the ultimate, but that's out there. And if people need to explore that, I'm not going to judge that at all. Mm-hmm. But what we do with our family and our business, we try to make that the primary motivation that we encourage you to buy it.
Yeah. I want to ask you a last business question, and that is, what do you wish talented young artists knew before they applied to a gallery, or what tips?
Oh, yes. That's a fantastic question. Okay, aspiring artists, get your pen out. Ready? I would honestly encourage every artist to take a few business courses, whether it be local community college or something that could be done online now. But I think a basic marketing, advertising, sales.
Yes.
There's, of course, I'm going to forget. There's two others. I usually have 5 that I rattle off. But the point is, familiarize yourself with the inner workings, the basics. You don't have to go be an expert, but if you are going to make your living at the easel as a fine artist, you want to have some idea what's going on, because the gallery and you most of the time have similar motivations. But when you understand like what makes a gallery tick and the real pressure of the bills that are always there, like the rent, the insurances, all of those types of things, the payroll, it's like you have to know their motivation, and that will obviously affect a lot of their decisions, and that'll help you to work with one another. So some basic business courses to have some idea. I've seen a lot of artists that say like, I'm an artist. That's why I don't want to do that. And I get that. You don't have to be an expert in it, but dip your toe in that water and see what it's like a little bit, because it's going to help you. And I think it will provide you a more complete relationship with the gallery owner, because when each side knows what the motivation is and you have a common goal. That's one thing I think I would like to say is I'm seeing more, or I've heard some things that are a little bit more adversarial, where there's like, it's like artist and gallery, like we're adversaries. I don't look at it like that. And maybe there's relationships out there like that. That would maybe indicate some type of dysfunction. I think the primary motivation of the gallery is to build up this artist, to work with them. I want you to make as much money as possible so you can keep doing these paintings. And obviously I want to make as much money as possible. And I'm not ashamed to say that. So I can keep the paintings coming in. And when we're really truthful with one another and we're clear about the motivations, the pathway to a good relationship is just, it's laid itself down. So we all do better when we're working on the same team, not sort of like, oh, this artist is like, can you believe this? Oh, this gallery is always doing this to me. It's like, sometimes it's like a lot of self-reflection, like, okay, what could I be doing better? And we do that with a lot of our relationships. It's like, you might be upset with something, but it's like, well, am I doing everything I need to do? Or is our gallery doing everything we need to do to be the most successful? And then we've reevaluated loads of times. It's quite certainly going to be the answer that no, you're not always doing it, because it's easy to backslide. It's hard to be.
And circumstances change.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So I want to ask a follow-up question. So if I am an emerging artist and I'm seeking representation, how does that work? I mean, where do I even start, right?
Yeah, so I would say there's a couple different different ways to approach a gallery. First off, you have to really analyze where you're at in your career. Is it going to be a good fit? So we get probably hundreds and hundreds of applications per month. I've got, yeah, it's a lot. I've got one gallery, and there's no way we're going to take things on at that level. Like to build an artist up, I'm convinced it's going to be a 2-year process of really like spending a lot of time and dollars, advertising, marketing, creating shows, whatever it might be, to move this thing into a direction where it can be self-sustaining. So first of all, you got to find a gallery that might be willing to do that. And certain galleries you might need to start lower to work your way into that and get paintings selling, establish a market, establish a little bit of a following. And then you can start to look, okay, my work has gone here. Is it time for a price increase? Is it time to approach another gallery? But you don't want to put the cart before the horse. And so I would say to all the artists out there, be patient. This is a marathon. It's definitely not a race. And if you're trying to, and the same thing goes for the creation of it. It's like, I wanted to get good overnight back when I started. It was very frustrating. And once you realize you're going to get better incrementally and be willing to fail, and the failures are where the growth is all the time. I guarantee that. You almost never have the insight to see the growth in the successes because you're enjoying the success, and you should. But the failure is where you see like, oh my gosh, what did I do there? I might have to go back to the drawing board. Yeah. So
I could ask a million more questions on that topic, but I'm gonna hold myself back because we do want to get to the part of you as an artist. And I just wanted to also throw in Hannah Keith Corey, must be a collector of Melissa's.
Yes.
She said very lovingly that that's how she felt. We were talking about, emotionally connecting with art and never wanting to sell it. She said, that's how I felt when I saw Melissa's art at Cutter. I couldn't imagine my house without it. So
that's awesome.
And then
good to hear from you, Hannah.
Magan Hayden, and I'm sorry for botching your name, I'm sure. Follow-up question: how important do you think is it to stick to a particular subject? Do you find it's much easier to sell that way? Not sure what she means by subject, like
probably artists who have a set scene that doesn't vary much.
Yeah. So, okay, I could say a few things on that. When we first start with an artist, I think what we like to do is we like to try everything across the board that they have, because you never know generally what the public is going to like. And then you do start to see patterns emerge of like, okay, we sell a lot of whatever, like this particular type of landscape from an artist, let's say. We don't sell as many of these, we don't sell as many of these. So we might say to the artist, we're getting great feedback on these. We'd like more of these. We're getting a little bit from this. So you try to round it out where you want to have a nice representation of everything the artist does. But again, you go back to the business side, there's like that business end of there's only so much wall space. So it's like, I'm not going to put up more of a style that maybe don't sell as well as the style or the subject matter, let's say, that does sell as well. Because you do have to give consideration to that. And that's just part of the business end of it. We're always joking around like, I wish we had another 5,000 square feet. That would be great. Like, yeah, it would always be great to put more out. And when you love art, you want to put more out. But the business aspect of it forces you to have to make a decision about what's going on the wall, what's getting framed. Every time we make a frame, it's an expense that won't see its return until the sale, and sometimes it never sees it. If the painting goes back, it gets cut down, and so that's just part of it.
But also talking about business, we always say confused people don't buy. So I think if you had another 5,000 square feet, you might actually find it harder to sell art because people then go into the decision overwhelm, right?
Yeah, Nina, that's a great point. It is that kid in the candy store, and every time you get 25 candy bars to choose from, you say, pick one, and it's like, I don't even know where to start. You got 3, it's like, that's the one I want right there.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're right.
How did you, with a business degree and a business to run, become an artist?
All right. Well, again, going back to my youth, my grandmother and my brother Mark and I used to paint. We had a little cottage up on a lake in New Hampshire.
Oh.
And we used to swim and fish and do all that kind of stuff up there. But when it was raining and we were looking for something to do, there was like a little breezeway porch, and she loved painting. She loved going to Rockport and Gloucester, Mass, and she loved all of she loved painting. And so she would set us up and we would paint with her. So that was probably the impetus for the beginning, but I never thought there was a career path for it. It was never like, in fact, she even said like, oh, if you want to get into that, you should probably be an architect. But that was never something that I thought that I necessarily wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So fast forward to when we opened the business, we were an emporium of sorts. We were selling baskets and pottery from New Hampshire, where I grew up. We were selling film back in the day. Everyone remembers the 35 millimeter film. We had watches, pocket knives. I actually went to jewelry school in Selma, Alabama to learn how to do some basic jewelry type things. We also had Nantucket light ship baskets out of New England that have scrimshaw on them. And I would look at the scrimshaw and I thought, gosh, that's really cool. And so I had one of the artists we were working with sent me a little piece of ivory back then, and then he sent me a bunch of tagua nut, which was the replacement for ivory. And so I would just carve into those, and I did a couple ships and some different things. And at the same time, I was starting to maybe paint a little bit, because it was I just thought, well, it's a hobby. It's something to do after work, take my mind off work. And so I slowly started easing my way into it. Then it got to a point where, I was maybe doing something every 3 months. Then it was like once a month, once a week. Then the desire to do something was there all the time. And so took a workshop from an artist, and that's really what jumped me off. I've always been a collector of different art books. So I'm looking in the books, and I'm sort of that personality that if you show me how to do something, I think I can see it. I'm a physical learner. That really helped. So having the gallery also allowed me to look over the shoulder of some artists painting. Several artists in the early years offered to take me outside, and I did some miserable paintings. I had one local artist who was he was like he was just a fun older guy, and he said, "We're gonna go paint tomorrow. We're going to this marsh. I want you to prime the canvas with burnt umber." I said, "Burnt umber, okay. Prime it tonight so it'll be ready. I'll have a tone on the canvas." I came in the next day and I had painted it as dark as you can out of the tube with burnt umber, because I didn't know what a tone was. He looked at it and he said, "What the hell is this?" I'm like, "I painted it with burnt umber." He said, No. Wipe all that off. You just staining the canvas so it's not white when you go. I was like, oh, well, it might have been nice to tell me that, because I have no clue what I'm doing. So I had a lot of those uncomfortable experiences, but I'm convinced you learn a lot from those. And
those are the best ones. Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Sure.
Yeah. So from maybe. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that sort of leads into the question that you kind of answered probably already, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you believe that being an artist is actually a choice?
I do. I sort of believe. I believe everyone has God-given gifts, and I believe you have, like, with those gifts though, there's like a responsibility to develop them. Mm-hmm. And for some people, it's music. Like, I wish I was a great musician. I kick around on an acoustic guitar and I play terribly, but it makes me happy sometimes. So, but I've never developed the strategy and the real practice that would be necessary to get good. So I don't expect to be great with that. And with artwork, it was different. It was like, that was motivating enough that I realized I'm going to have to practice a lot. So I do think you'll have predispositions of interests. And if it's art, if it's dance, it's singing, whatever it is, you're basically willing to sacrifice your time in order to get better at whatever that is. And that's what I felt like with painting. It's like, it's so humbling when you have a vision to do something. You probably know this, Melissa, and it's like, you can see the painting in your head and then you go to execute it and you don't have the tools yet. And so in the early years, it was a constant, felt like walking right into a wall. Like, gosh, I know what I see in my head and I can see it. And I just couldn't get there. And I had a great opportunity to work with a couple artists that gave me great advice. There's one I worked with out west, and he was an athlete that got hurt, and he turned to painting as a way to sort of pick up his life from where it was. And so I was an athlete growing up, and in athletics, I would practice a lot. I was a baseball player. And so the amount of hours I spent with my dad in the backyard with my brother and I, throwing us balls or pitching to him, it was just countless hours. And so you get good if you spend enough time at it. And it was the same thing. So painting made sense to me, like, okay, it's practice. And this particular gentleman told me, you got to practice. You're not going to create a masterpiece that's going to go into a museum every time you sit down. Sometimes it's like, go study the way the light hits the edge of these trees. Go study the way like the water breaks over. And it's like, oh yeah. Again, I want to put the cart before the horse, and you just want to get good. And it's like, well, getting good is not an overnight process. The willingness to get good can be an overnight process where you flip the switch and say, I'm going to be willing to fail. I'm just going to keep grinding. I'm going to work my tail off. And then I'm going to look back next week and say, like, what did I do? And next month. And then you start looking at the years. And as time goes by, you can see your progress. And that just an extension of that thought, I would say to artists, that's how you find your style too. Because early on, I wanted to, what's my style? Like, I'm looking at all these artists. I'm trying to get influence. Your style is paint your ass off. And before you know it, you're going to look back and you're going to see, like, you have a style. You have a voice.
You do.
It's the only way to find it. Yep.
So you mentioned how the light hit something in the tree trunk, and that just now has me on the topic of looking at the picture behind you,
Yes.
which as a photographer, I would swear that is a photo. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So this is work that I've got going right now. It's about 4 by 5 feet. It's painted in oil. It's this past summer, I took my family up to New England. We spent some time in Bar Harbor, Maine, and we went through the Acadia National Park. And this is from a little trail hike we did. And I love, growing up in New Hampshire, our backyard was just woods. And so again, like that early influence of just playing in the woods as a kid, that made its way into my personality, that when I go to paint things, like if I can find the ocean, some body of water, or a woodland landscape, I'm in heaven. I like, that's what I would.
Wondering how you chose landscape as your specialty, and that's sort of the beginning of an answer.
Absolutely. I mean, I used to climb trees like the one behind me and see how high up to the top you could get on those things. And I mean, we would just kick around in the woods, just throwing sticks and doing dumb stuff. But yeah, it infuses into yeah. But yeah, so this is all about the dappled light that I love that goes through a forest. And again, early on when I started painting, I saw a work. I can't even remember who did it, but I remember seeing like the light spilling through, and I remember thinking, I wish I could paint that, but it was so complex. I quite literally didn't even know how someone would start something like that. Like, where do you begin? Like, how do you start to sketch that in? And again, over time, I have spent a lot of time plein air painting, although I haven't got the opportunity to do that as much now. And that's one of those balances with my business side. But I've spent enough time outside that I study a lot, and you study the shapes. And I started to realize you can't go to the details before you mass in the major elements of a piece. So it's like, what's it going to be about? If it's going to be about this dappled light, well, then you got to make sure you give yourself the space on the canvas to tell that story. Or I've seen artists before. It's like, what's this painting about? It's about the clouds, and so they'll put in a horizon line, but 3/4 or 2/3 of it will be the ground plane. And it's like, well, if you want it to be about the sky, you might, it's like you have to set it up to be about the sky. And so I started learning those types of things. And so these are an exercise in organizing chaos, I think, which I seem to like to do. Very chaotic, and there's a million details, and it looks tight behind me, but if you get up close, it's a little bit looser and a little more brushwork. Hopefully I'm able to synergize those worlds of, it looks like from 30 feet, you'd swear it's almost photographic, but you get up close, and when you engage with it, you can see the paint surface isn't as labored as it looks from far back. So
yeah, great. Why did you choose that picture just to sit in front of for today?
That was the biggest one that could cover all this space behind me.
Perfect answer. The video filmmaker in me loves the answer. Yeah.
That's the truthful answer. Everything else is too small. I got a mess behind me right now.
Yeah. Well, we all have practical considerations in our lives, so
Right.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, Melissa, what other questions do you have?
I had forgotten to look. I was having so much fun talking. No. Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you. I haven't seen any nude paintings in Cutter and Cutter. This was supposed to be in the other section. Is there a policy at Cutter and Cutter about nudes, and what is it based on if you do have one?
So we do have some. We've had some in the past. We earlier this year we sold a Renoir nude bather piece.
Wow.
We've got
good.
We've got some from
Sorry for
Salvador Dali. So some of the etchings and stuff we do have some of that.
Uh-huh.
Ultimately, I guess I would say it's a little bit of a choice as a family. There's a little bit of an aspect of we've got a tourist market that we're in, and there's a lot of young families, and there's a lot of we've had nude pieces in before. It can make a gallery hard. It can make it hard to handle.
Gotcha.
So for us, we're maybe not the perfect market for it, but I have an appreciation for it. I have an appreciation for the style and whatnot. But yeah, for where we are in St. Augustine, it's just not the best fit. Although we're not opposed. Like I said, we do have some things, but it's not our forte. And that's another thing as a gallery. It's like you're going to find out what your specialty is, and we try to have a nice mix of figurative and landscape and still life and sculptures and glass and wood turning. And
I love your glass.
Yeah, us too. Yeah, we got a neat family, the Lawton family out of Chicago. We have a lot of glass from them. They're fantastic artists. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Matthew, is there anything we should have asked you that we didn't ask you?
Gosh, no, I think it's been a pretty good conversation. I think so. Obviously there's like a million things you can ask, but no, I feel like we got to sort of dip our toe into both sides. And again, I would say, for me, it's like I have a unique opportunity to be around so many artists, and that really helped to influence me and get me off the ground. It's the same thing that sometimes prevents me from working as much as I would like to, but it's a good trade-off. It's one I'm willing to have because, it's like I wouldn't be here if I didn't have all that we've done through the gallery. And so they're forever connected.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's a rich life.
It is. I've had some really great opportunities, and I'm living in a great town with my wife and 2 children, and I have nothing to complain about.
Yep.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for being our first guest. I was super excited, Melissa, to just you.
Say that again, Melissa. You broke up.
You are a stellar guest. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was fun. I think this is going to be a wonderful podcast, and I would encourage anyone who's tuned in and listened, spread the word, get the news out there, because an Artful Life podcast, I think, is going to be able to connect people in a way that gets them having these conversations that puts art in everyone's mind. I think that's a good thing. That's a positive thing that everyone needs. So.
And it's amazing the feedback we've been getting just announcing this. I already have a whole document with suggested guests, artists, and topics. So this is really getting people's juices flowing in a world and sea of a lot of sameness. So I think this is a nice fresh wind for LinkedIn, and I for one am super excited for this. So,
and our next episode in May is going to be about the intersection of art and architecture.
Oh, right? Nice.
Yep, and we have a very special guest for that. So I'm very excited to see 2 sisters duke it out.
Excellent. All right.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening and for being here. If you have watched the whole thing, yay. The comments are always open. So please, keep the conversation going. And also, if you have questions or suggestions for future topics, as we just said, don't be shy. DM Melissa or me and let us know what you think would be of interest for the general public on LinkedIn to hear about when it comes to art and how the ways humans make and use art. So thank you for listening and have a wonderful day. And we'll see you in a month from more or less today. Be well, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate it.
It was great.